Before we sat today to meditate, I was sharing some thoughts as to what Buddhists are afraid of. What is our worst fear? Something that you don't get to read or hear about often is that when you look at the very essential teachings of Lord Buddha and true practitioners, why we practice ultimately is to get rid of this fear or fearful fact from ever occurring to you, and that is birth. This goes contrary to the world and what the world tries to do. The real world, the world of experience, the world that always has something to give us through the senses, from which we choose the good versus the bad, of course. Sensory perceptions, sensory experiences. The world is always throwing things at us from which we naturally will be inclined towards trying to get the best, the most comfortable, the most pleasing. And that pretty much is behind us being kept in this vortex, in this cycle, in this non-stop cycle. In this life, you happen to be born as a human, thanks to your own efforts, primarily, if not only, the intentions that led you here to this form in this life. In order for you to practice a discipline, a technique, in the first place, to be interested in it, of course. Excuse me. But in order for you to apply the principles, the practice, and this is what this path is all about. This is not another religion that we practice. This is not a philosophy. This is based on right view. All other paths, including those included within the Buddhist, what came to be accepted within Buddhism as being part of Buddhism, even though it was never part of Buddhism, but over centuries, because of people becoming lazier in practice, more and more ignorant, and deviating from right view, all wrong views will somehow, some way or other, try to convince you that it's good to become, to be born, to be gaining another form of an experience. Something to look forward to after this moment, after this life, where things are going to be much better. What does that sound like? Who talks to us like that most of the time, if not always, in the back of your mind? That is the language of craving, plain and simple. The Dhamma goes contrary to craving. Craving is what leads us to a new birth, which is what we try to eliminate. That's what Nibbana is. Nibbana is the emptiness of suffering, is the end of suffering. You cannot have an end of suffering and get on top of that a big bonus of a new birth. You can't have them both. So we're trying to end it because with birth comes what? Suffering. Why? Look at a newborn, look at a child. How could you say that? It's going to be suffering. Well, let's start from the fact that the child has to wake up 400 zillion times at night. Not allowing the parents, if they have parents, if they have caring parents, to take care of them. Teething, headaches, trying to get the child to walk, etc., etc. And that will take them all the way eventually to death. And in the middle, throughout that spectrum, there's all kinds of experiences, most of which will be painful experiences in some form or other. So Buddhism, the Dhamma, is not life negating, because we are in life. That's how you're able to hear my voice. You have your own life, you have your own experiences. But we're trying to understand that is where everything stems from. What I'm referring to is transformation. This path is about transformation, but transformation can never occur unless there's application of principles. If you've ever learned another language, or any language, your mother tongue, mother language, that took practice. At the very least, practicing speaking. Application. Where you go from an ignorant state to a knowledgeable state, where you've applied it. It became part of your personality. When you open your mouth, you're able to convey your thoughts, your ideas, your concepts, your feelings through the medium of words. It becomes part of you, to the point where you start to think in words, in concepts, in imagery. What is that? That means you've utilized, you've applied it to the point where you have mastered something. We've all mastered the ability to feel and to name our feelings, to have likes versus dislikes. Even that requires some level of application, of course. But this path is about transformation. So that's where this leads. It's not going to lead us. The Dhamma, we don't practice, we don't even read the Dhamma for the purpose of feeling cozy inside. Like reading some, sonnets from Shakespeare, or some poetry, or watching a movie to feel good at the end of a rough day or a rough week, to feel good about ourselves, and then we drop it. So we go on our lives doing something else, leaving this tiny little box called Dhamma aside. That's not why we study the Dhamma. That's not why that's why you practice. Why though? To eliminate the chances for you to keep yourself on the path of that cycle of more and more suffering. Of course, this is not appealing for most human beings, or other beings as well. Starting with the value on morality and virtue. That's usually a difficult sell, as they say, for many people when they come to the sila portion, which is right after dana. There's sila. Dana meaning generosity. Sila is the living your life according to moral principles, virtue. Whether you're living alone on an island by yourself, or in the middle of a very, very crowded, busy city. So the principles are dead, really, ideas, dead ideas that don't take you anywhere unless you plant them in every moment of your life, in every day of your life, with effort. So today's sutta is, excuse me, from the numerical discourses, which are the Anguttara Nikayas, and it provides us tools. Tools are there for a purpose. You don't go around carrying your toolbox around you. If you have a toolbox in your shed, in your garage, in your kitchen, somewhere, you don't carry them. You don't turn them into necklaces and hanging on your neck and or carry them with you to bed. They're tools. They have to serve a purpose. And unless we apply them, then the tools are, as I said, dead as far as you're concerned. The tools that we have today are no different than the tools that were, these same tools that were first made available at the time of the Buddha. Earlier, I was mentioning to you before we sat how this path when we apply it, we come to understand that the most important asset you have is life itself. And life, your life versus the Buddha's life, in essence, there's no difference. As far as its opportunity factor is concerned, opportunity to make a change, to transform. The Buddha, hypothetically speaking, Siddhartha, had he chosen not to leave the household life, we would not have Buddhism. We would not have Dhamma. We would definitely have not had countless Arahants, both human and non-human. We could not have had them. Impossible. But he decided to make a change. He probably was not planning to have that many, at least in the beginning. He was just wanting to share the light of Dhamma that was giving him so much joy. He was transformed and he wanted to give other people opportunities. But they could not have had that opportunity unless they were alive. That's what I'm trying to drive at here. So in essence, you and I and everyone who's alive today has the same odds, if you want to think of it in those terms, has the same potential as the Arahants did. What are we going to do with this life? The biggest asset that we have. Because in the middle of your difficult day, difficult life, difficult circumstances, there's a big chance that we're going to negate, devalue the importance of it having been exactly the same. Because we think that, what I mean by that is the opportunities that people had with which they were able to free themselves from samsara, from the cycle of birth and death. It was not the Buddha that did it for them. This is a difficult pill to swallow for many of us because we always want to have the help. If the Buddha was alive today, guaranteed I would have become an Arahant. That excuse. It's an excuse. You have all the tools that you need to become an Arahant. That's what I'm trying to say. To cut yourself free from suffering, you have that. Because the Dhamma is here, and most importantly, you are alive. You are alive. So how are you going to live your life? That's what it all comes down to, because you've also had, yes, we had countless Arahants, but we had even more countless in number people who came across the Buddha, saw him face to face. They saw his eyes, they heard his voice, but walked away putujjana, walked away dullards, walked away obstinate, walked away conceited, walked away disinterested. Just like we do often in our life when we leave the Dhamma outside. And what I'm trying to convince us of is to do the otherwise, the opposite of that. So may this sutta that we're going to be covering encourage us more to take charge and not to waste this life also, as the ones before we've each had. So Anguttara Nikaya number 6.63. This comes from the Book of the Sixes, Chakka Nipada, Book of the Sixes, and it's from the section called Mahavagga, which is the great section. And it is, as I said, AN 6.63, Nibbedhika Pariyāya Sutta, which I translated as penetrating. Penetrating. You'll see as we go on. So let's begin because we have some territory to cover with this sutta. Bhikkhus, I will now teach you an exposition on the method of penetrating into the Dhamma. So listen and pay close attention. This is the Buddha talking. If you notice, it didn't have the "thus have I heard." There are suttas that don't have that beginning. And that's fine. But still, it's, from the canon, Pali canon. And the bhikkhus go, "Yes, Bhante," responded the bhikkhus who were gathered there. The Blessed One then said, "And what, bhikkhus, is the exposition on the method of penetrating into the Dhamma? Here, bhikkhus, sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The origin and arising of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The variations in sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The fruits of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The cessation of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. And the path leading to the cessation of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. Similarly, bhikkhus, feelings should be clearly known. The origin and arising of feelings should be clearly known. The variations in feelings should be clearly known. The fruits of feelings should be clearly known. The cessation of feelings should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of feelings should be clearly known." Do you notice the Four Noble Truths there? The origin. What is it, first of all? What's the cause of it, meaning the origin? The cessation, that's the third Noble Truth. And the path, that is the Noble Eightfold Path. So Lord Buddha had a way of dovetailing different principles into each other. They're not different in the sense that they're they supplement each other. They help each other. They drive the point across. They really are helping the practitioner, because sometimes you're able to catch, because of our memories not working so well, or disoriented, or not being mindful. Sometimes all you need is one part of that formula, and then everything unravels. That's why they're all connected. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, etc. So let me continue. Similarly, bhikkhus, memories and mental associations should be clearly known. Perceptions, sanyas. The origin and arising of memories and mental associations should be clearly known. The variations in memories and mental associations should be clearly known. The fruits of memories and mental associations should be clearly known. The cessation of memories and mental associations should be clearly known. And the path leading to the cessation of memories and mental associations should be clearly known. By the way, what do you notice happening here is your elements of the aggregates are there. So now we just talked about sanya earlier, it was Vedana. So please pay attention. Similarly, bhikkhus, mental contaminants should be clearly known. The origin and arising of mental contaminants should be clearly known. Mental contaminants here are the asavas. Asavas, sometimes translated as influxes or cankers in English. I translate them as mental contaminants because they have this contaminating quality to them, and they are leaking inside us. No longer, though, in the Arahant. The variations in mental contaminants should be clearly known. The fruits of mental contaminants should be clearly known. The cessation of mental contaminants should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of mental contaminants should be clearly known. Similarly, bhikkhus' actions should be clearly known. The origin and arising of actions should be clearly known. The variations in actions should be clearly known. The fruits of actions should be clearly known. The cessation of actions should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of actions should be clearly known. Similarly, bhikkhus, suffering should be clearly known. The origin and arising of suffering should be clearly known. The variations in suffering should be clearly known. The fruits of suffering should be clearly known. The cessation of suffering should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering should be clearly known. Nowhere in this structure, formulation, and the step-by-step guide that's going to be elaborated by the Buddha in a minute, nowhere do you see any guesswork followed. Nowhere do you see any haphazard, formula, in a sense, or like, yeah, we just leave it up in the air and see where it lands type of a thing. There is no wishfulness. There is no belief. There is no hoping for something to happen somehow, some revelation to happen later on. And we just sit here and pray for that. Now you see even more distinguishing aspect of the true Dhamma, the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught versus every other aspect of the Dhamma that came because of people's ignorance later on over time to this day. That's why we call the Pali Canon the authentic book of what the Buddha taught. And what was the purpose, bhikkhus, for it to be said? Sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The origin and arising of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The variations in sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The fruits of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. The cessation of sensual pleasures should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of sensual pleasures should be clearly known. Bhikkhus, there are 5 branches of sensual pleasures that are desirable and agreeable, which include visible forms that are agreeable, enticing, desirable, stimulating, and thus sought after, yearned for. Sounds that are agreeable, enticing, desirable, stimulating, and thus sought after. Odors, smells that are agreeable, enticing, desirable, stimulating, and thus sought after. Flavors and tastes that are agreeable, enticing, desirable, stimulating, and thus sought after. And touches that are agreeable, enticing, desirable, stimulating, and thus sought after. The 5 carnal pleasures related with the body. But bhikkhus, all these are not considered to be sensual pleasures. For in the Noble One's dispensation, these are merely called the 5 branches of sensuality. It is one's very own lustful intention that turns it into a sensual pleasure. So having the senses does not mean much. It's what being added to that sensory perception by the individual involved. Lustful intention that turns it into a sensual pleasure. Lustful intention is where a person's sensual pleasure is to be found. The beautiful things seen in the world are not sensual pleasures. Lustful intention is where a person's sensual pleasure is to be found. For the beautiful things seen in the world stand as they are. The wise remove the very desire for them. So the Arahant is not dead while alive to senses. The Arahant feels. They do have sensory perception. But because of the absence of lust, we don't see it becoming a sensual stimulation for them anymore. But they still have to bear the burden of carrying a body, nama rupa. They have the senses, minus the lustful intent. And what bhikkhus is the origin and rising of sensual pleasures? Contact bhikkhus is called their origin and arising. Passa. And what bhikkhus are the variations in sensual pleasures? Sensual desire for visible forms is one. Sensual desire for sounds is another. Sensual desire for odors is still another. Sensual desire for flavors is still another. And sensual desire for touches is yet another. These are called the variations in sensual pleasures. Sometimes you might find a person who's not interested in all of the spectrum of sensual variations. What I mean by that, you might have a person who's sick and tired of tasting delicious food, or has had enough. It might even be within the variation of food itself, the taste. Let's say if you eat the same type of food, even though you love it, eventually you might get to a point where you would prefer to have another taste introduced, and you're not interested in the previous one. Even that is variation. Now the person is pursuing the dessert versus the hamburger they were eating, even though they craved it all their life. But now they just want the dessert. They want something that is sweet, the chocolate versus the salad. Even though they worship salad up to that point, they've had their fill. Even that is transitory. But for the reality of that moment, for the experiencing of that life period of that person's life, the experiencing of it, there is an infatuation, there is a lust after this. So, in essence, it really doesn't matter which variation you fall into. It's whether you see it or not, because you're still dangling in the extremes of the pendulum, going back and forth, and you're stuck. Each of these is a doorway for more possibilities for birth, by the way. That's why the person at the end of their life is craving another birth, because they haven't had enough sweets. They haven't had enough sex. They haven't had enough intellectual stimulation concepts. They haven't had the joy of finishing a task, a job, solving a problem, let's say math equation. Some people get excited over that. Solutions about astronomy, astrophysics. It takes some lusting to do that. It's lust, when you have to cover up a whole set of blackboards in some university because you're driven by this incredible impetus to solve. There's conceit there, of course. Lust. But in this case, Lord Buddha is talking about the 5 carnal pleasures. He's not mentioning the 6th, which is manovinyana, which is what I was referring to just now. But it's the same. And what bhikkhus are the fruits of sensual pleasures? Here, bhikkhus, when someone desires to experience sensual pleasures, consequently, a series of events come into being, which turn out to produce either good merits or bad merits for the person. These are called the fruits of sensual pleasures. Even when you're pursuing sensual pleasures, you might end up doing something that is akusala, unwholesome, unskillful, bringing apunya, which are demerits. The same thing applies for the wrong pursuit of sensual pleasures. In essence, they're both wrong when you think of it like that, because the person, this is another reason why the Dhamma, the Buddhism, is not merely pursuing good deeds like some modern teachers have been saying, Buddhist teachers, unfortunately. Remember, before Buddhism, before the Buddha became a Buddha, there were traditions that were practicing the doing of good deeds so that they can accrue, collect, accumulate more good merits. But you're still stuck in birth. That's why the Dhamma is completely different than all the rest. Because it wants to cut completely clean the plantain tree so it doesn't grow back again. Because in your next birth, you might actually, because of your good deeds, you might be born in a good place for some time. But they will run out and you're back into the slaughterhouse again. What is the solution to that? Nibbana, ending of samsara altogether. That's why many people were not interested in what the Buddha was teaching. They wanted to be entertained. Sensual pleasures. If not in this lifetime, then definitely in the next one. Go ask any elderly person, any person who's sick, about to die in the hospital. Their dream is to be reborn in a nice place. Whether it's a heaven, this, that, but in a nice place, not a bad place. Craving. However way we want to cut it, it's craving. And this is showing us the end of the craving. And what bhikkhus is the cessation of sensual pleasures? Bhikkhus, the cessation of contact is the cessation of sensual pleasures. This same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of sensual pleasures. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind, or right concentration. This is one that I've done in 2021, I think, this translation. So today I translated as either right samadhi or right collectedness of mind, but stability of the mind still carries the same meaning in this case. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands sensual pleasures in this manner, the origin and arising of sensual pleasures in this manner, the variations in sensual pleasures in this manner, the fruits of sensual pleasures in this manner, the cessation of sensual pleasures in this manner, and the path leading to the cessation of sensual pleasures in this manner, then he is to be recognized as one who possesses the penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of sensual pleasures. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding sensual pleasures. So the Buddha completed it beautifully. This was an exposition of the first category that we saw regarding, in this case, sensual pleasures. Now we're going to go into feelings. This is what a matchless teacher does, experienced teacher does. He posits the question, and then in very brief form, and then he opens it up slightly, and then he dissects it category by category, and then outlines each. After the outline, he has to explain what is, and he has to give examples, and that's what he did. And then he has to summarize. That was just a summary right now. He completed it. Nowhere do you see this in any of the philosophies, any of the teachings available in documented history. Only a Buddha can teach like this. Or, as Lord Buddha says, a teacher who is a student of this teacher, of this sasana, only. And we see this again and again, unfailingly. Next, let's go to the next one. And what was the purpose? Because for it to be said, feelings should be clearly known. The origin and rising of feelings should be clearly known. The variations in feelings should be clearly known. The fruits of feelings should be clearly known. The cessation of feelings should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of feelings should be clearly known. Because there are these three types of feelings: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neutral feelings. And what bhikkhus is the origin and arising of feelings? Contact bhikkhus is the origin and arising of feelings. Again, we see contact. Without contact, there's no sense pleasure. There's no feelings, Lord Buddha says, either. In the Brahmajala Sutta, Lord Buddha, to pulled the rug from every single one of the 62 wrong views that beings have. He always says that too is dependent on contact. Tadapi passa pacchaya. That too, all of them. So contact, wherever you go, you will find contact. That's why we have to have our wise reflection of contact at the moment of occurring. Even if it's a painful experience, your experience, or a pleasant one. Look not at the content of the experience, but at the point of contact. Let's go on. And what bhikkhus are the variations in feelings? There are bhikkhus material pleasant feelings, spiritual pleasant feelings, material painful feelings, spiritual painful feelings, material neutral feelings, and spiritual neutral feelings. These are called the variations in feelings. And what bhikkhus are the fruits of feelings? Here, bhikkhus, when someone desires to experience a certain type of feeling, consequently, a series of events come into being, which turn out to produce either good merits or bad merits for the person. These are called the fruits of feelings. That's how you know it was a bad experience. That's why you know that's like, if you fall and break your leg, that's not going to be a feeling that produces good merits, right? An experience that is producing to you good merits. You made contact with that experience, you felt, you see it, you're aware of it. It's not pleasant. An outcome that is not pleasant versus something that it is. It is a pleasurable feeling. And what bhikkhus is called the cessation of feelings. Bhikkhus, the cessation of contact is the cessation of feelings. You cut one off, the other one doesn't happen. Here we see an aspect of paticca samuppada being clearly delineated. You don't have passa, you don't have contact, then automatically, you don't have feelings. In the typical paticca samuppada series, you have a missing link here, right? You don't have salayatana. That's really being triggered, right? Because you usually will have three. When you're studying paticca samuppada, it's much better if you have three links in front of you. The one before, the one in between, and the one after. So contact doesn't happen without salayatana, the six sense spheres, eyes, ears, nose, etc., for feeling to be registered. So similarly, contact, in order for it to occur, it needs salayatana, the six sense spaces or spheres. Feelings, in order for them to be experienced, they need to have contact. That's what I mean by the chain links. Bhante Candana says this beautifully. He says, imagine a chain link, one that's whole and the other that are in half, cut. In this case, one, the whole completion, and then half of the other. Bhikkhus, the cessation of contact is the cessation of feelings. This same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of feelings. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind, right samadhi, or samma samadhi. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands feelings in this manner, the origin and arising of feelings in this manner, the variations of feelings in this manner, the fruits of feelings in this manner, the cessation of feelings in this manner, and the path leading to the cessation of feelings in this manner, then he is to be recognized as one who possesses the penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of feelings. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding feelings. The holy life, brahmacharya, he's talking to bhikkhus, by the way. The fullness, the completion of the holy life means arahanthood. However, holy life is not reserved only for bhikkhus, of course, or monastics, of course. Please be aware of that. I keep saying at every single discourse, reminding you, as lay people, you are taking part in living the holy life. So long as you have awareness of the Dhamma in your actions, practicing generosity, practicing sila, watching your thoughts, what kind of language are you using to speak to yourself in the subvocal speech? How are you treating yourself? How are you treating others? Are you protective in your behavior of your virtues? Do you live a principled, high principled life? Okay, that means your meditation will go deeper and deeper. All this is part and parcel of the holy life in reaching its culmination in gaining insight, understanding. And this is what I meant by earlier when I said the Dhamma is all about transformation. You cannot have transformation unless you are becoming wiser today than you were yesterday, than you were a moment ago. This is the litmus test. To know if the Dhamma is working for you, you must see, and it's a healthy comparing and contrasting. This is a healthy comparing and contrasting, as Venerable Ananda says in the discourses. This is not conceit as such. Comparing and contrasting how? Well, you're looking at yourself now, because Mara can come in, or your conditioning comes in and says, no, you're still the same, you're lousy, you're not able to maintain a focus, or you're not able to practice as purely as you need to or should. Hold yourself, stop yourself in your tracks and say, okay, last year when I did that, or would I, if I were in the same situation as I were back then, whenever it was, where you did, break sila, for example, you couldn't keep your precepts, you did somebody some harm in the past. Now, if you had the same opportunities, would you repeat that? A simple test in your mind. How about my understanding? Ask yourself, is my understanding now about life, about relationships, about situations, about myself, etc., events? Of course not. Oh, well, I'm so glad I'm not that person. Okay, when you have that reaction, that means transformation is taking place. It's not mental jargon. It's not more and more ideas, mind you. Transformation means wisdom. And that's why a person who's being transformed from within, they're not interested in going and telling other people what's happening to them. That's how you know that whether the person is fake or not. That's why people want to join so many forums, because they have the same narrative, the same story to carry from one forum to the next. So they feel good about themselves, so that other people saying something about them gives them the illusion that they are transforming. So the person is seeking other people's approval for them to have gained something higher. This is foolishness. This has nothing to do with growth, in fact. So true transformation comes when the person is truly living the holy life. You cannot have a holy life without virtue, without wisdom, without generosity, and definitely without samadhi, without practicing meditation. And what was the person, bhikkhus? For it to be said, memories and mental associations should be clearly known, sannyas. The origin and rising of sannyas should be clearly known. The variations in sannyas should be clearly known. The fruits of sannyas should be clearly known. The cessation of sannyas should be clearly known. And the path leading to the cessation of sannyas should be clearly known. Bhikkhus, there are these 6 types of memories and mental associations. Sannyas. That's why I love Pali, because Pali has one word In English, we need to use as many words as possible, and they change because of the context. In Pali, it doesn't. It's nuanced beautifully. Just, 2-syllable word. But we have to really, that's why oftentimes perception doesn't do the job, right? The term perception. Because oftentimes it's the memory that's kicking in. Even sati, mindfulness, sometimes, depending on the context, is actually a definition for memory. Sati. Mindfulness, that we say, right? But in this case, sanya, it also works as memory and mental associations. Bhikkhus, there are these 6 types of sanyas. Those that pertain to visible forms, sounds, odors, flavors, touches, and thoughts. Now we're talking about the salayatana, for the 6 sense spheres. All 6 are listed there, if you notice. These are the objects of the organs, right? The eye versus visible form. So sanyas pertaining to visible forms. That means you close your eyes and you're still seeing it. That means both sense spheres worked. One was the visible eye, and then you close the eye isn't working now to pick up the data of visible forms, but the mind is. The mind organ, mano-vijnana, is working. Mano-sanya is working. And what bhikkhus is called the origin and arising of memories and mental associations? Contact, bhikkhus. Here we see again, contact is the origin and rising of sanyas. And what bhikkhus are called sanya, variations in sanyas? Bhikkhus. Sanyas pertaining to forms is one. Sanyas dealing with sounds is another. Sanyas dealing with odors, smells, is still another. Sanyas dealing with flavors is still another. Sanyas dealing with touches, tactile objects, is still another. And sanyas dealing with thoughts is yet another. These are called the variations in sanyas. And what bhikkhus are the fruits of sanyas? Bhikkhus, modes of expression and communication are the fruits of sanyas, such that, given the situation, whatever a person perceives, combined with whatever is remembered and mentally associated, is what ends up being expressed by that person. Lord Buddha is teaching psychology here, 2,600 years ago. These are called the fruits of sanyas. So he's saying the way we communicate and express ourselves, given the situation, however you perceive it, but tinged by whatever blueprint or marker or stamp or watermark it has from previous sanyas. That's how your expression is going to be. That's how you're going to interpret the experience. That's why the presence of a teacher is absolutely a must. A proper teacher who sees, or somebody who is in the position of a kalyanamitta, sees what's happening and says it like it is. Now, the person, is he or she going to listen? That's a different story. This is why the Buddha says sanyas have to be really the ones that need to be addressed in your practice, because you might think that you're practicing Dhamma, but if you have the wrong view, that means your sanyas are all off whack. You're not practicing Dhamma, you're fooling yourself. Which means wrong view. Miccāditthi is present. And if you have the view being wrong, and all of the Noble Eightfold Path won't be noble at all. It will be ignoble. You will be on the wrong path completely. Speech will be wrong. Intention will be wrong. Meditation will be wrong. The effort you apply will be wrong. Everything, and definitely samadhi will be wrong. There won't be any wisdom, definitely, coming out of that. Why? Because at the core, right view is missing. Why? Because it's sullied. You've dirtied it with wrong sanya. That's why we introduce ourselves again and again to the Dhamma, to the suttas, to the actual interactions between the Buddha and his noble disciples, situations, and really try to understand, look carefully, scrutinize, and then bring that into your life. A few drops of that and see what, or drops of your life into that Dhamma and see if any of the theories or ideas you had, the sannyas, were accurate or not, reflecting truth or not. Most of the time, they are not reflecting truth. So I hope that makes sense. And what bhikkhus is the cessation of sannyas? Bhikkhus, the cessation of contact is the cessation of sannyas. This same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of sannyas. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands sannyas in this manner, the origin and arising of sannyas in this manner, the variations in sannyas in this manner, the fruits of sannyas in this manner, the cessation of sannyas in this manner, and the path leading to the cessation of sannyas in this manner, then he is to be recognized as one who possesses the penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of memories and mental associations. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding sannyas. Remember, no one can penetrate, no one can develop penetrative understanding of the holy life for us. No one. So this path to Nibbana is not the result of you sitting in the passenger seat of your life, letting things happen type of a deal. No. That's why drugs will never work. Never. That's why the Dhamma, true Dhamma, can never be a drug. Blind practice. Practice based on faith, which is no practice at all. You're just living a passive, lazy life, essentially. So don't expect there to be penetration. It's not about getting goosebumps and goose flesh and being inspired and feeling all fluffy inside and this and that, and that's it, because now you're going to be an addict of that. That's why people who practice a little bit of metta, and if they get into some jhana by accident, that becomes their religion, or dream about regaining that experience for the rest of their lives, and they won't. There's a misunderstanding. That's not Dhamma. Penetration hasn't taken place. And what was the purpose, bhikkhus, for it to be said? Mental contaminants should be clearly known. The origin and arising of mental contaminants should be clearly known. The variations in mental contaminants should be clearly known. The fruits of mental contaminants should be clearly known. The cessation of mental contaminants should be clearly known. And the path leading to the cessation of mental contaminants should be clearly known. Bhikkhus, there are these three mental contaminants, asavas. The mental contaminant of sensual pleasure, kama-asava. The mental contaminant for becoming, bhava-asava. And the mental contaminant of ignorance, avijja-asava. These are the three that have to drop in order for the person to be attaining arahanthood, by the way. And they do not occur after one attains arahanthood. There's a misconception people have, that it's going to be just paradise after this person enters through the beautiful gates of arahantship or something. And then all these things disappear suddenly through magic. Why? Because now they have the title, they are wearing the crown of an arahant. These things go hand in hand. These things should be happening in the life of the practitioner already. They're being chipped away moment to moment of practicing sati, mahasati, and mahapanya. Moment to moment, it's already happening. And that's why they're attaining arahanthood. It's not like, putting the ox after the cart, right? No, the ox is the one that draws the carriage. The horse is the one that draws the carriage, not the other way around. Because I see many people are hoping to, they want to attain, they want to ask, they want to find out, am I a sotapanna, am I an anagami, am I an arahant yet? What do you think, Bhante? I'm da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All these things, questions. I go like, dude, where's your life? How is the fabric of your experience of living life? Do you see the transformation I was talking about earlier? It must be clearly demonstrated there for you. You must know. Have you transformed already? You should know. You don't go around telling people, asking people, because this is still, for some reason, people are not growing up from that delusion of titles. And what bhikkhus is the origin and arising of mental contaminants? Ignorance, bhikkhus, avijja, is the origin and arising of the asavas. I like to translate avijja as willful ignoring, because there is the tendency to look at ignorance as a noun, as a passive thing, as if you didn't read enough books, type of a thing. Ignorance is the result of you having not had the necessary information. No, it's not just that. There's more involvement from our part. When you don't practice maintaining sati, you are practicing avijja. It's a practice, therefore it's not a noun. It's a verb. Ignorance is in fact willfully ignoring to maintain sati, willfully wanting to maintain your dedication to keep your sila, willfully saying, yes, but my tendency here, the sankharas are coming in, I could see them, I could smell them, I can hear their approach, but what was that insight the other day that I had, that I wrote in my journal about? What was that all about? I remember for 5 minutes, my mind was blown away. I could see things clearly. Okay, what was that all about? About situations like this. Okay, now I'm in this situation. How will my action now be given the insight I experienced? This is what wisdom does. This is what willful ignoring doesn't do. Willfully, you ignore. That is why avijja is poison. That is why we keep and maintain ourselves in the asava land, in the leakage department, in being contaminated. Why? Because avijja is there. Avijja is not a thing. Just like the paticca samuppada links are not things. They're not even links with hard edges, thinghood attached to them. They're not. They're living experiences you're going through. But you will never, ever, ever know unless you bring in sati to be there, carefully looking. And that's the only way that you're going to get rid of avijja. Just like in the case of the asavas, I was saying, you don't walk into arahanthood land and, yeah, come here, come on in. There's no more asavas here. That is stupidity, which many, many people follow. Let not you be one of them. So Ignorance, bhikkhus, is the origin and rising of the mental contaminants, the asavas. And what, bhikkhus, are the variations in mental contaminants? Bhikkhus, there are mental contaminants which lead to rebirth in hell. Mental contaminants which lead to rebirth in the animal realm. Mental contaminants which lead to rebirth in the realm of hungry ghosts, petas. Mental contaminants which lead to rebirth in the human world. And mental contaminants which lead to rebirth in the heavenly realms. Bhikkhus, these are called the variations in mental contaminants. Depending on how thick the asava is. Imagine you come from having worked outside in the garage or in the field somewhere, and your hands are dirty, and you happen to touch cow dung. And you go in and you're cleaning up your hands, this and that, and then the color of the dirt or the dung is not there anymore. It's not visible. Ooh, people around you or you smell it. Maybe it's in the nooks and crannies of your nails. Ugh, you could smell it. It's disgusting. But for all intents and purposes, from afar, it doesn't show that you're still sullied, dirty, and smelly. So think of it in that spectrum, in that way, in that fashion, the rebirth, into the hell realms being the worst, hungry ghosts, animals, etc., human and deva realms. So what is, or how dense, how smelly is or are your hands? That's why a person who lives like a peta while alive will end up in the peta realms if they're lucky, fortunate. Why? Because there's hell usually as the first option for most people, especially in this world today. Most of the population of this planet will end up in the hell realms, I'm sad to say, or at best, the peta realms, the miserable ghosts. There's so much greed, which is a signature of the petas. Accumulating, greed. And if they have some good merits, they might get an upgrade and land as fleas or ants, working themselves to death. Still better than petas. People don't think about these things nowadays as they're living their lives irresponsibly, as if this is it, this life. And from here on, it's all up. No. So what's the level of density, viscosity of the asavas in the heart? That's why the arahant is constant, the person who's seeking to attain arahanthood is trying to get rid of all of the residues, even the microscopic molecule size pieces of the asavas, wants to obliterate them completely. And that's what the Buddha expects from us, wanted from his students to do. Don't stop until you are complete. You've completed the holy life. And what, bhikkhus, are the fruits of mental contaminants? Here, bhikkhus, being immersed in ignorance, someone lives while bringing forth a series of events into being, which produce consequences that lead to either good merits or bad merits for that person. These are called the fruits of mental contaminants. Basically, there is still spots of ignorance in the mind, in the heart. It might be bhavasava. They might not have kama or sensual lust anymore. Or they might not have even the bhavasava, the longing to be reborn, for re-becoming, even in the highest Brahma realms. They might not even have that, but they still have ignorance. They will take some form somewhere. It might be a pure abode, but still, it's a downgrade from arahanthood, complete liberation. And what bhikkhus is called the cessation of mental contaminants. Bhikkhus, the cessation of ignorance is the cessation of mental contaminants. What I was saying earlier, willful ignoring. Stop yourself from living in willfully ignoring type of a life. Nobody can do that for us. Nobody. No matter how much a person might love you, a teacher might care for you. Nope, you have the reins, full control of that. And this same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of mental contaminants. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands mental contaminants in this manner, the origin and rising of mental contaminants in this manner, the variations in the asavas in this manner, the variations of the asavas in this manner, the fruits of the asavas in this manner, the cessation of the asavas in this manner, and the path leading to the cessation of the asavas in this manner, then he is to be recognized as one who possesses the penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of the asavas. Therefore, because this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding mental contaminants. And what was the purpose, because for it to be said? Actions should be clearly known. The origin and arising of actions should be clearly known. And the variations in actions should be clearly known. The fruits of actions should be clearly known. The cessation of actions should be clearly known, and the path leading to the cessation of actions should be clearly known. Intention, bhikkhus, is what I call action. This is what we call kamma. This is what makes kamma kamma. Without intention, there is no kamma. Plain and simple. But what gives it that spine, what gives it, as in the action, what gives the action that authenticity as a true kamma action, it's the intention. Cetana, Pali. It is through having the volition to do something that one intends and engages in action, whether by body, speech, or mind. Through having the volition to do something that one intends and then engages in action, whether through body, speech, or mind. And what bhikkhus is the origin and arising of actions? Contact, bhikkhus, is the origin and arising of actions. Again, we come to contact. And what bhikkhus are the variations in actions? Bhikkhus, there are actions that lead one to hell. There are actions that lead one to the animal world. There are actions that lead one to the hungry ghost realm. There are actions that lead one to the human world. And there are actions that lead one to the heavenly realms. This is called the variations in actions. And that's why the Arahant's actions are, in fact, fruitless. They don't produce another life anywhere, including the heavenly realms. That's why they don't make kamma, because there is no connection. Remember in the beginning I said in the sutta how lust is the factor that turns the sensory perception into sensuality. Without that participation from our part, it's nothing. And for the Arahant, it's simply being sensed, and that's it, end of story. Move on to the next sense perception. Similarly with the actions they commit, whether it's mental, physical, or verbal. Of course, that does not mean they walk around like robots, automatons. No. When Venerable Revata was walking as an Arahant, When Venerable Rahula was walking, when Venerable Sariputta was walking or looking at someone, there's so much love. There's so much tenderness, kindness flowing from their eyes. The way they would hold the bowl, the way they would eat. There's so much beauty there. So someone who's unaware looking at them, they're so moved and touched. And when you ask them, they'll say, of course, look at how beautiful the actions are. But when you go and ask the Arahant, that's why Venerable Sariputta was known as Mother Earth. Whatever we throw into the earth, into the soil, whatever we try to bury, whether it's gold, diamonds, pearls, dead bodies, soot, dirt, trash, the earth will say, okay. That's what happens with the Arahant. And what bhikkhus are the fruits of actions? Bhikkhus, the fruits of actions are threefold. Either experiencing the consequences of action here and now, or experiencing the consequences of actions in the next birth, or experiencing the consequences of actions in a subsequent birth. Bhikkhus, these are called the fruits of actions. There's several suttas. One day, probably in the near future, I might share with you a sutta where discusses, we hear, a discourse on kamma and the variations, because people always want to know exactly, okay, if I do this, when can I get the response? When do I get the result? Or that person who's doing this to me, how soon will they get their result? Is there a chart? Is there a secret, formula I could follow, like a multiplication table that, tells me how soon, how fast? No. Only a Buddha, a living Buddha, could help us in that regard by being specific. And that's why, no one can exactly explicitly point out what action was responsible for you to experience this in a past life or distant life. But sometimes they are very immediate, right? That's what Lord Buddha is saying here, the first category. You experience the consequences right here and now. Perfect example is when you try to touch fire, right? Or drinking a cup of cold water, or touching a cold window in the middle of winter. You take off your glove and you touch the glass, and all of a sudden you feel the cold. Or you step outside into the snow. That's immediate, right? But there are the majority of experiences when we talk about kamma, intentional action, deal with things that will come to us later. Sometimes later means later in the same life, but in many cases, it is in the next birth or in future births. Again, it requires the necessary nurturing or nutritious, metaphorically used here, environment to promote the bringing up of those actions. Not every action we've ever committed will ever come out before you attain Arahanta. Let me just say that, because the number is beyond astronomical of especially the bad deeds we've done. But combined with the good deeds, they cannot be measured. They cannot be counted. There's too many. That's why it's laughable, the giant theory that they are seeking to end bad karma. It doesn't work. Lord Buddha would just laugh at them. It's impossible to get rid of karma like that. But the process you can eliminate, and you can close, and you can break the bridge, you can destroy the bridge of karma happening again while you're still alive, and that's the end of birth. So there's no more going to be anybody born so that you have to face the countless karmic effects of your past actions. That's why Lord Buddha always wants us to finish the job. That's why he was telling Angulimala, when he was being abused, thrown rocks at, hit with sticks and things, clubs, every time he went to Pindapata to get his food, because he had killed previous to being ordained to seeing the Dhamma. Previous to that, he was a murderer. He killed people's loved ones, but he was still alive. So they were identifying who he was, and they were coming and they were hitting and they were trying to get even by spilling blood. And he would come most of the time bloody. One time he comes in with cracked forehead, and it's like gushing blood, and even his bowl is barely there. It broke, most of it. And Lord Buddha says, bear it, Brahmin, because had you not attained, you would have experienced incredible suffering in your next birth. That's why Arahantship has to be the goal for us. Or at the very least, attaining Sotapatti, the first stage of awakening, stream winning. And that comes through understanding. All of these things that I'm going through with you here, we're exploring it together, is for that purpose. You don't need anything extra, that's what I'm saying. All you need is your direct participation, involvement in this transformative work that no one else can do other than you. And what bhikkhus is the cessation of actions. Bhikkhus, the cessation of contact is the cessation of actions. The same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of actions. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind. Because if you're coming from a place of correct attitude, correct intention, you won't do the previous wrong actions. Now, would you still? With the newly developed understanding? Of course not. Already you just ceased doing that action. There's no miracle. There's no magic that happened. You just stopped doing that. When you stop breaking the first sila, first precept, not to cause intentional harm or kill another being, or not to engage in any sexual misconduct or steal, when you stop doing that, suddenly there's peace. Suddenly in your mind, you won't find agitation. You protected yourself. You're speaking truth. You're not lying anymore. You don't have to remember anything, like Mark Twain says. You just say it. Okay, done. There's calmness, serenity in the mind. You already are practicing right livelihood. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands actions in this manner, the origin and arising of actions in this manner, the variations in actions in this manner, the fruits, the cessation, the path leading to the cessation of actions in this manner, then he is to be recognized as the one who possesses a penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of actions. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding actions. And what was the purpose, bhikkhus, for it to be said? Suffering should be clearly known. The origin and arising of suffering should be clearly known. The variations in suffering should be clearly known. The fruits of suffering should be clearly known. The cessation of suffering should be clearly known. And the path leading to the cessation of suffering should be clearly known. Birth is suffering. Old age and decay is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. Grief, wailing, depression, pain, and anguish are suffering. Not getting what one desires is suffering. In short, the 5 grabbing aggregates are all suffering. The 5 aggregates: form, feeling, sannyas, mental perceptions, memories I said earlier, sankharas, right? The habitual drives, and vijnana, consciousness. Those are the aggregates. When we're attaching ourselves to them and saying, this is my identity, this is me, this is my perception, my feeling, I feel this way, and that's the end of the story. That means the feeling and I or myself have become one thing in my mind. And good luck separating the two, because there's definitely no sati, there's no wisdom, hence suffering. Because next moment life is going to come and slap me with some other experience, some other feeling. Good luck negotiating that with this. Now I'm fighting with life, saying, but I like that feeling, I want more of that, not this. Why did you bring me this? Like, who told you to bring me this? I love this person, now they're gone, they're dead. Why did you do that? Life, we're fighting. There you go. Suffering, grief, pain. Pain is not a word. It's not a noun on a piece of paper that you read. Pain is real. Dukkha is very real. You're not taking an eraser and trying to erase the word dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. No, that's not it. And what bhikkhus is the origin and arising of suffering? Craving bhikkhus is the origin and arising of suffering. He didn't mention contact. Did you notice? And what bhikkhus are the variations in suffering? Bhikkhus, there is suffering that is of an extreme nature, suffering that is of a mild nature, suffering that fades away and dissipates slowly, and suffering which fades away quickly. This is called variations in suffering. Pretty self-explanatory, right? And what bhikkhus are the fruits of suffering? Here, bhikkhus, someone with a heart that is overtaken by suffering grieves, wails, beats his chest, and becomes obsessed, confused, and bewildered, saying, for example, why did this thing happen to me? Okay, hold on. Are you the only person, the only human being who's ever experienced this? Why did it have to be my knee that I had ACL tear? Or why did I break my ankle? Why me? Okay, why did I lose this loved one? You mean to say you're the only person in history who's ever lost? Wow. No, of course not. Don't be silly. Okay, let's focus on that silliness bit for a second, because you're being silly. Ultimately, yes, process it, understand it. Yes, there is the presence of sense of loss. Yes, but don't allow the mind to become so confused and bewildered. That's what Lord Buddha would always tell people who had a loss, who would come to him. Overwhelmed by the experience of suffering with obsession in his heart, he reaches outside of himself, searching for answers as he calls out, who will tell me a line or two to help me reach the ending of this suffering? This is the person who's overwhelmed. Bhikkhus, I say that as a result of suffering, there is either confusion or a constant search. Bhikkhus, these are called the fruits of suffering. So which one is yours? I ask you that, not Lord Buddha. I'm asking you. Which type of suffering is yours? Is it one that is the result of confusion or producing confusion? Or is it one that is putting you in the mode of, going after a quest, search? And where is that search taking you? I think the wiser choice would involve a search that takes you out of suffering, not to camouflage it temporarily so you feel good. And what bhikkhus is the cessation of suffering? Bhikkhus, the cessation of craving is the cessation of suffering. This same Noble Eightfold Path is the very cessation of suffering. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability of mind. And bhikkhus, when the noble disciple knows and understands suffering in this manner, the origin and arising of suffering in this manner, the variations of suffering in this manner, the fruits of suffering in this manner, the cessation of suffering in this manner, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering in this manner, then he is to be recognized as one who possesses the penetrative understanding of the holy life, leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, because this is the purpose for what I said earlier regarding suffering. This, because is the exposition on the method of penetrating into the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Another superb discourse that we are fortunate enough to have today, to encourage us to keep us, progressing in our quest. Because suffering has to be understood. But it's not a thing that you do, like compartmentalized, you understand, and now you walk out of suffering and you don't ever encounter suffering again and you're just on the path. No, suffering will be there. Remember, nibbana is the absence of suffering. The absence of suffering. But that doesn't happen later on, sometime later. Every day we must be experiencing a less dosage of suffering. Now, this does not mean that life will not. Remember kamma? When the situations are ripe, nutritive factors of, meaning situations, conditions are ripe for a certain outcome to crop out of our past actions, it will do so. But what we're doing is we're augmenting, supporting ourselves, strengthening ourselves, having the weaponry of understanding, meaning sati and panya. These are the best weapons. And when you have the shield of sila, you're impenetrable. Nothing can touch you. No past kamma will shake you. If you're able to hold on willfully, not willfully ignoring, but willfully, then automatically the suffering that we experience will be of a lesser intensity, to the point where others might come and say, how did you deal with that? I could never. What has happened to you? That's another question they might ask. The old you that I knew would have freaked out by now, overwhelmed. But you're settled. You're like, wow, what's your trick? What's your secret? That's another question people might ask. Or there might be nobody to notice. Doesn't matter. You did. That's the understanding that needs to develop, because the majority of the actions then that are taking place are not going to be physical actions. You're going to notice as you practice more and more, you're going to notice that the majority of the actions are mental actions. You're going to notice that sila is taken, on a far deeper level. It's not even verbal anymore. It's mental. It's within. It's internalized. That's why when a person goes into seclusion, it doesn't mean that they now miraculously stopped all actions. No, they might physically not be breaking sila, but they might still be breaking sila verbally and definitely mentally. So a person of this practice, of this tradition, in this dispensation of Lord Buddha, they would be practicing in seclusion, but while maintaining the same level of dedication regarding sila in all of these layers, the mind, the verbal, and the mental, the physical actions, but especially the mental. That's where the purity comes from. That's where we first break sila, in fact. In the mind, before your body follows along. It's like the bullwhip, you know? If you shake a bullwhip, if you, I don't know what the verb is, if you hit something with the bullwhip, the end of the whip is the very last whoosh, painful part that tears skin. But where did it start? The handle. That's the culprit. Undulates, it's like, and then people see the end, physical action, but they don't consider the big one, the main culprit, which is the handle, how it's moving in the wrist. So I will pause here and see if there are any thoughts, questions, comments. If there are none, then let us complete today's session with the transference of merits. Akasatha Chibumata Devanaga Nibedhika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Lokasasana. Akasatha Chibumata Devanaga Nibedhika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Desana. Akasatha Chibumata Devanaga Nibedhika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Mam Parati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you experience the joy and happiness that this practice brings, crowned by experiential insight that shatters the darkness like lightning in your heart. May you experience that on a daily basis. May your sati grow. May your wisdom grow incalculably. And may you and your loved ones live happily. May you not experience enmity, and may all disturbances and disruptions, difficulties in your life be wiped clean. Until next time, Sukhi Hotu.